Okay, a good and a great morning to all. According to my clock, it is past 10, and so I think we will briefly start. Um, this is the first out of a fairly comprehensive number of webinars that have been planned from now until Christmas that will introduce um, Polyrural Plus technologies, primarily perhaps for the audience of people who have participated in one or aims to take part in future cascade funding calls from the project, but also for anyone of general interest. And since it's the first, um, since it's the first uh, webinar, we haven't really found our form yet, so we shall see how it proceeds. But the first topic up is what is JackDaw, how it works, what are metadata, and how these can be used. Broad topics, and I imagine that we will spend something in the vicinity of half an hour to do so. For the sake of these seminars are recorded, so for this reason and to facilitate editing, I will take questions and discussions, I think, more towards the end, if you are not too confused after listening to me, to not that you don't have anything to ask about, but provided that you have something you wish to discuss, I think we do the discussions towards the end of the walkthrough. So I will spend now the first half hour or something like this on taking you through what JackDaw is, and then we will do a discussion following that, so that we can edit this and publish it on the web in a more coherent fashion later. Should I say something that is outright horrendous, feel free to stop me there and then. And as our good colleague Petra has pointed out, and possibly with a particular concern for me, the disclaimer here should be noted that I speak as myself, and that the European Union cannot be held liable for whatever monstrosities I might utter here. Okay, so JackDaw. JackDaw is a tool that started by deciding a name, and then afterward desperately tried to re-engineer a long version of the name that should fit. So, just-in-time AI coordinator for knowledge discovery and analytics on a world scale. About myself, briefly first. I am Runar. I have been around for quite some time, and nigh on 3 decades now of working with data. And interestingly enough, the pattern that repeats itself is that we started out with text files and we're coming back to them again. Now we are scripting GitHub action flows and Terraforms, server deployments and whatnot. But in between this, we have sort of stacked up and become familiar with quite a broad range of different technologies. Here under, for an example, initially GIS, spatial data, which was what I concerned myself most with in the past, focusing then primarily on static data and smaller data sets, and then gradually Internet of Things emerged. We got more sensors, we got more data streams, and then AI enabled us to start to do something about those data streams, not just accumulate a sensational amount of data, but also analyze them, make some predictions, make some determinations. And then LLMs came and everyone forgot everything. And then we're back at text again. It's text, text, text. I've been working for the same company for the majority of that time. I've been working quite a bit in different places. I am Norwegian, fiercely and orthodoxly and radically Norwegian. But I have been living outside of Norway for more than 20 years, and presently I'm sitting in Brussels. However, it is my long-term goal to return to my beloved Nordsjø in Norway, dead or alive. So, with that, that's my setting. That's who I am. Polyrural Plus and JackDaw. I will first introduce a little bit the setting of why we developed JackDaw. Then I will say something about the tool itself, how it works. Then we'll dive into how we put data into this and how we enable the tool to interact with the data. And then finally, we'll discuss how can you, as interested parties, integrate with JackDaw, or how can JackDaw integrate with you? There are several scenarios to discuss, many doors to open. But we'll start briefly by a look at the context. So, Polyrural Plus is a project that is aiming to look at how can rural regions find their way in the modern era. We are sort of sitting at the cusp of people don't have this traditional reliance on primary industries, primary sector industries, production, agriculture, and this sort of stuff in their minds. Of course, everyone eats still, but these are sort of in the urban contemporary eye, food is something that should be produced in other countries and shipped in, and it should be available, and it should not be made locally because it is expensive and so on. So the sort of the role and the function of rural regions are put into question and sort of marginalized somewhat, and that has been a societal trend that we've been in. And of course, our objective is to see how we can do something about that on a planning level, and other seminars will dive into the sort of the functional and philosophical and political context of the project. But what we are supposed to do in the context of these seminars is to see how can technology in any way help the people who are trying to shape the futures of these rural regions. And the first thing that we have said then is, okay, we don't start from zero. I mean, that's the major failing that I have done myself and seen others do in my years on the planet, always sort of starting fresh. But we have quite a lot of data to build on. We have Spire, which, although unexciting now because it's an old initiative, a big initiative, and perhaps to some a boring initiative, it's created a lot of fundamental spatial data that are essential to many analytical tasks. We have Copernicus that supplies us with a steady stream of Earth observation data. We have Eurostat that collects transactionally a lot of relevant information. We have the various national statistical census bureaus that have similar infrastructures. We have the PSI directive, which has caused the growth of the national geoportals, and we have many, many different sources, enduring and living data sources, where we can get stuff from. So the point is, how can we sort of automatically extract all this and connect them through some sort of AI-driven reasoning tools in a way that will make it easier to use them than before, for people who already have their plate full, not people who need to become experts in some new tool or software or service that we have developed. To this end, and this is where some of you will find yourself, we also offer cascade funding in the project. So many of you have bid for projects in that cascade funding regimen and been awarded successful projects where the objective is to test some sort of puzzle piece of this hypothesis above of connecting rural challenges with technology in addressing some real world scenario. So this seminar, so some of you have then said that you wish to interface with Polyrural Plus technologies as was a requirement. And so this seminar series is in principle, or at least in part, aimed at introducing those technologies to you. So what is JackDaw then? JackDaw is in its absolutely simplest form, it's a chatbot. And it's a fairly standard chatbot with a few caveats. It helps people to talk to maps, not just text streams. The name, as I said, cleverly decided by Karel, our friend Karel Harvat, who for some reason wished to call everything that he touches by a bird name. And in this case, chosen because the JackDaw apparently is known to be a clever bird, which is what we try to emulate. What is it that makes this chatbot different from any other chatbot? Because there's not any shortage of that nowadays. Well, the problem is that whereas people know where they can ask questions, they don't know necessarily what questions to ask. There's lots of chatbot, lots of endpoints, lots of things. So many of the traditional workflows that existed in local administrations would be, there would be a GIS guy, there would be a planner, there would be an engineer, there would be some sort of group of specialists. And if they had some sort of a data need, they would go running to each other for someone to dig out the necessary results and provide them to the sector expert who would then make his assessments. Now, with the emergence of the LLM as an orchestrator, we are able to take that problem and make it a little bit simpler. Maybe we can cut out the data analyst from some of the operations. Maybe we can make the LLM go and fetch the data we need and process them in the way we want without the necessity for an intermediary. And that means that we open up the systems not only to a lot of people who can ask anything, but we'll also open up the systems to those people who know what to ask and how to ask. Because the challenges that you sit with when you're forming a rural spatial plan, is not the same as one might imagine from a data scientist point of view, where you are digging in numbers and matrices and data is what matters always. It's a matter of weighing these things against values. So we are trying then to make a chatbot that has knowledge and functions that are useful to rural development actors, people who are working to shape the futures of rural regions, people in economic development agencies, business development, spatial planning, policy development, and the planners and consultants who support them, as well as rural businesses, agricultural practitioners, and value chain actors there. So the ability for them to ask lead meaningful conversations about space with the chatbot without singular technology language, as would be the case if they needed to consult it via an expert. The other thing that we have been quite adamant about is trying not to start on zero. We have a lot of data. We're going to use those data. We have a lot of catalogs that have indexed metadata that gives us an idea of where more data can be found. There's a lot of services. We are not starting on zero trying to rebuild all those from the ground. We are trying to build on top of those so that many of the protocols, many of the data services that you will find downstream in JackDaw are well-known traditional things. But we believe that we have a greater chance of advancing the state of the art if we don't start on zero. So that is the context. Now, the tool itself, how does it work? Well, we have a natural language processor. We have spatial data inputs, maps, geometries, regions, and we are able to lead a conversation that provides us mixed outputs, including text, diagrams, maps, visualizations, tables, whatever it might be. So the thing we have to look a little bit at is the problems that we face if we do this in a purely standard way, if we don't give our chat agent anything except the system prompt. So the first problem we have is that the decisions that we're going to make when we are working in a rural region are often associated with very, very detailed spaces, not a municipality or a county or some big geographical unit as a whole, but it's many, many small patches. For an agriculture, for a farm, it could be a parcel where you grow a patch where you grow some specific crop or vegetable, whatever it might be. For a rural spatial plan, it might be an individual residential area, commercial area, infrastructure area, playground, very, very small patches of space. And of course, whereas an LLM, if you try to ask an untrained LLM about that, they will not know anything about high resolution locations. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to provide the LLM some knowledge about the place we're interested in. So that is the first thing we're doing. We are, in addition to asking a question like you do in any chatbot, we are also indicating a geographical location. And then once we have that location, we can make a trip to many different spatial data services to extract information about that location, so that now we are able to lead a conversation not only about a specific location, but also in the context of all information we're able to derive from that. Second problem is that LLMs contains everything and nothing. So they have a little bit of knowledge about everything, but not everything about anything, essentially. So if we want to apply a chat agent to one of our problems, we need to tell it how to behave, and we need to tell it what areas it should be an expert in, not to pass itself off as an expert on everything, because that's the domain of hallucinations, where perfectly good knowledge from one domain is accidentally mixed with anecdotal or accidental information from another. And so when you ask for the planning code for a region, you don't get the planning code, you get a mishmash of whatever existed in that particular corner of the LLM. So we have then created a repository of data underneath that contains both textual data and spatial data that can be accessed by means of textual, topical, spatial, or temporal data. And in that manner, we are able to provide answers to people about absolutely random places. Well, random in this case not being a negative, but arbitrary places, any place that a user might be interested in, we are able to withdraw some specific context for that. So if we move on then and look at how this tool works, we can choose an area, and we can ask a question about that area. For some reason, which I can explain, but I won't, we have as of yet not implemented streaming responses. So while it is typing out the text, we are showing this waiting box, whereas in a very short while we will have it type this word by word as it does in any other chat agent. Now here we can see that our question was answered. So we marked a rectangle in the map, and from that rectangle we got out information about the business composition, about the climate, about the land use, summarized for this region. And so we know something specifically now about it, and we're able to continue working with it. I'll come back to demonstrate a little bit more about it later, but that is sort of the broad idea about things. And so how do we bring stuff into this? Well, the first thing we need to know is we need to have access to information about spaces. And what is useful to know? Well, one thing that is always doesn't hurt to know is land use. It doesn't hurt to know what places are called, and this little illustration here shows on a very small patch of farmland in my village in Western Norway, where I mean it's smaller than half of an average farm in the Czech Republic. It's a very small, very small and fragmented patch of land. But even with this picture that you're looking at here, there is at least 400 geographical names here. So it shows the futility of trying to query an LLM by name. So this mandates the use of this, drawing this box that I showed in the previous slide. So we need to be able to supply context. But then once you selected context, we need to know something. Okay, what have we put into JackDaw? We put in there information about infrastructure. We put in information about demographics. So population numbers, both on a municipal level and also on a grid level. We have information about terrain, slope, elevation, aspect, land use, climate, infrastructure, etc., etc. We also have accumulated quite a lot of textual knowledge. So we have legislation, policy guidelines, industry news, funding opportunities, and other bodies of text that we have connected to JackDaw through a retrieval augmented generation model, where we vectorized all these data into a vector embedding database. And then we have some near real-time information services like weather forecast that allows you to mix these more semi-static data sources, like, or at least non-real-time sources like land use. You can match land use against climatic parameters to find out if the conditions are right to sow, to harvest, to water, to do various things. The flow of this thing works on this principle. The user asks a question. We then check that question. What is the question about? What are the topics the user are asking about? Then we do an enhanced query. And this query consists now of the original question plus the topics that we have extracted, the information that the user is interested in as we perceive it from the user message. Then we send that to a metadata catalog that we have, a catalog that stores and describes the tools. And that catalog will determine then which tools are relevant to answer our question. These tools, the metadata for these tools are returned. We then process the different tool calls as mandated by the LLM. And for each tool call, the result of it, we add it back to the context, and we do that for up to 10 iterations. And when we have either reached 10 iterations or the LLM is satisfied, doesn't want to call any more tools, we pass along the original question along with the whole context to a rich LLM that provides the final output and visualizes it. So that is how the tool works. Then we dive into the data tools and metadata section. So we have in our stack several instances of RAGs, and our colleagues at PSNC have developed a web API for automatically creating and querying RAGs, and that will be the topic of a specific webinar in this series of webinars. So I will not delve much into that now. But essentially, this is the process of vectorizing text into vector embeddings, floating point arrays, where each number and the position of the numbers carry some sort of meaning. And when we generate a vector for our question and match that against the vectors for our available resources, we are able to retrieve those documents, those matches that are closest to what we want to do. And if we have then chunked our content wisely, which our friend at PSNC will explain about, then these will be nice pieces of information that will enrich our context sufficiently that we're able to answer meaningful questions. Vector data has been the biggest driver for all of these local GIS operations that I spoke of before, where a planner would harass a GIS expert to make him a thematic map of 1 or 2 or 3 topics, and then he would study them in his office or on the screen or whatever he might do separately. So the driver for much of desktop GIS for the past 20 years has been vector data. But now vector data are often transactionally updated or handcrafted and quite laborsome to create. They can be large because they have lots of data in them, but they are covered generally small areas if they are in any high resolution. And so if we looked at them from an IoT point of view, they would be fairly infrequent updates and often manual. They are good. They do allow us to make nice graphics that don't have jagged edges, and they look very accurate and neat and clean. And they do allow us to do sophisticated analysis. But the problem with them, if we are using them on a case like JackDaw, where we are working on a continental scale, is that if you want to use vector data with any high resolution, the CPU load and capacity for conducting large analysis that covers large areas is a little bit limited. So what we're doing with that, which will be a topic for another webinar, is to fit such data into a GeoRag, where we index in the same way we index text, we index attributes by topic alongside geometries and so on, so that instead of dealing with traditional spatial data that comes in layers, where one layer covers all the data about that topic for all of Europe, instead you would ask, show me a situation map of area X. And then based on that, the GeoRag would not retrieve layers of data, but it would retrieve the relevant information and stack it up and draw it nicely in a map according to the user's questions. So that is one approach, GeoRag. Our friend Marek is working on this, and a seminar will be dedicated to this later. However, to enable much greater scaling, we have bet quite a bit of our available chips on grid data, because one of the things that we would like to do is not just to look at highly detailed spatial data for intersecting polygons and calculating the meters along the road or something like this. But we're interested in looking at our area, our rural area, in the context of its surroundings. So the strengths of our area are not always depending on the assets that we control ourselves. They are depending on our position relative to other places. And one of the hypotheses that we're working with on a philosophical level in the project is, or maybe I should say hypothetical, scientific hypothetical level, is urban-rural linkages. So the fact that our area sits in a specific location relative to one or more cities, one or more transport hub, one or more natural assets, gives it a value beyond what is in the place itself. And so to be able to do large-scale analysis on that level with vector data would be exhaustive on a CPU level. So for this reason, we have included a lot of grid data that covers all of Europe, and that makes it possible to ask questions such as how many people live within 22 hours drive from our place, how many airports can I reach, how many ports can I reach, how many natural assets are available to me for recreation within 30 minutes drive from my place, and that sort of things. And then we can intersect all those things and see how it pans out. So that makes it possible for us to make maps like this, for example, on demand, which shows here the biggest urban conglomerations in Europe. And okay, you'll see what you would expect here. You see Madrid, you see Paris, you see London. That's what you would expect. But then you see a city that doesn't really exist here in Western Germany, Southern Holland, and Belgium. Sort of under the radar places, but essentially the biggest urban area in Europe is not a city, but it's the functional intersect between many industrialized and urban areas in this patch here. So by scaling, I mean, this is of course not a discovery made by this project. This is a well-known spatial planning concept, so the Rhine Delta and whatnot. But the thing is, throughout this using this concept on a lower scale, we can find places that have a fortuitous location between two different centers, between 10 different assets, between many different scenarios, and that could be the strength that helps us carry this place forward, find future uses for these places, find things that can be done there. So by having all the raster data, we also have the flexibility of being able to combine them into cubes. We'll have a separate seminar both on how we can generate centrality data like shown in the previous one. That comes already this Thursday. And we'll have a separate one later on how these cubes work. But in principle, you're able then to stack many grids on top of each other, and you can then create raster calculations where you set different criteria for each of the layers in your cube or each of the dimensions in your cube. And by doing so, you can eliminate areas that don't satisfy your criteria, or you can narrow down areas to whatever fits your criteria. So in this case, I'm looking for elevations between 0 and 159 meters and they should all be facing south, or let's say they should be facing in the direction where you are more likely to have sunlight, and the areas should be with a slope less than 9 degrees. And then you will be left with those areas that satisfy your criteria. And you can substitute those dimensions for anything you like. It doesn't have to be terrain like it is here, but it could be, one could be distance to airports, one could be population, one could be available businesses of a certain type or other. There is no clear limitation. So having data and having a chat agent doesn't solve all the problems. We have one remaining problem, and that is how do we connect these? And the connection between LLMs and spatial data are tools. Now, Some of you, those of you who are already working with this, would frown at this first diagram I showed that showed where we were calling a catalog to determine which tools we should use. And because LLMs typically have a built-in capacity to supply as many tools as you like without using any catalog or anything like this. So what we have found is that if you supply an LLM with too many options, too many tools, it generally becomes less precise in when to use it. So if I give my model a tool, or I give it 28 tools that is able to describe person A, B, C, D, etc. If I give it 28 tools, it's less likely to call the tool than if I give it 6 tools and ask questions about 6 different entities. Whereas if I give 28, it might call the wrong tool, or it might omit calling tools altogether. So that means that our catalog approach, which we are presently in development of, is to try and pre-filter the available tools before we pass them to the LLM, thereby giving the LLM a better chance at calling the right ones instead of calling none, or becoming confused, or whatever the technical term is for what the model does when it makes wrong decisions. So we are building such a catalog that brings in the model context protocol as a mechanism to discover and execute tools remotely based on data that are published with dynamic tools on top of them. And that process, the one that I showed you in the previous picture with the user question and the calling of the LLMs and so on, that is shown below here. You will have this presentation, so I won't go much into that. But essentially, the starting point of this is that we have a catalog. In this catalog, we can have raster data and vector data. They can be uploaded and published. If it's vector data, they would go to the GeoRag. If they are raster data, they would go into a good old web coverage service, OGC web coverage service. And in any case, they would have metadata associated with them. Some data will be accessible through APIs, so they will not be uploaded, of course. They will just be registered with metadata. And based on the metadata, we are able to describe how each dataset can be queried. The same way that we describe how a dataset should be visualized, so that we can say that, okay, this should be drawn as with red for values between 1 to 100. We can make descriptions about the dataset that says, how can this dataset be queried? We can dynamically then create tools that are exposed to the process that I showed before, where when the chat agent, JackDaw, asks for relevant tools, it queries an MCP, model context protocol discovery endpoint, to get the metadata for the relevant tools. Once it has sent those tools to the LLM and the LLM has decided which ones it wants to call, we can do the remote calls to those MCP endpoints and get the data back and continue our chat until we are finished. So that is the catalog concept and flow. Then we are very close to the crux of this now. How can this be integrated with your tools, your projects, your applications? So there are 3 modes, essentially. We can integrate JackDaw into your application. So the MCP services will make available tools from JackDaw so that you can invoke them in your own chat agent. So if you have built a project or a tool or a technology that has a chat agent and you want to use some of the tools that are available from JackDaw, you can reach them from the MCP. We also have a web service endpoint where you can call the chat endpoint itself, and you can build your own chat into your application based on whatever is available in JackDaw. The second option is that you yourself build tools, web services, or MCPs that JackDaw can call in turn to get additional local capabilities for your region, your focus area, your domain. So that is version 2, integrating application into JackDaw. And the third one is to publish data through JackDaw, to use our catalog, but which is not, I mean, as I said, that's a work in progress. So that's a little bit manual at the moment, but it will improve within the life cycle of your projects, and certainly within the life cycle of ours. But that would then allow you to publish your data onto our catalog, and it would then immediately get dynamic tools and become queryable through the JackDaw agent itself. And that way, JackDaw as a chat tool would get additional knowledge. So that is the 3 ways of integration. Presently, we are doing some work on seeing how we can optimize this. We are using ChatGPT as the backend for many of the model calls here. But as you could see from the diagram I showed initially, there were several return trips to an LLM in this case. And in many cases, we are just using the LLM for orchestration. And so to save costs, we are looking at using self-hosted LLMs that are less volatile when these gentlemen here makes decisions, which, I mean, it looks like that could be reasonable to hedge against volatility among these. So that's one thing, and we're also doing self-hosted models for RAGs that PSNC Raul will talk about later. We are trying now to, I mean, from a technical point of view, this is working, but we are now trying to tune it so that it fits better to people's lives, expectations, problems, challenges, instead of just offering them a big clumpy tool. So we're working now to try and understand possibilities and limitations, and it would be very nice if through cooperation with you, we were able to understand better more and more diverse local use cases. We have one big challenge is to make this chat agent say, I don't know, because chat agents are very fond of giving answers, same as when you ask someone in the street for directions. They will give you directions whether they know them or not, because it feels good to be able to help someone, but sometimes your help is not the truth. And chat agents are very unapologetic on this. So to make a chat agent tell, I don't know, when someone asks something is also a goal. We're trying now to build this publishing workflow so that regions can add their own data. We're trying to strengthen this cross-agent integration through the model context protocol. And we are inviting you, both of those of you who are in Cascade funding projects and others who are interested, to join us and see how we can use different business cases on this platform to see if it's able to add any value to them. So with that, I say thank you very much for your attention. I remind you once again about the disclaimer here that the European Union would like to clean its hands of anything I might have said, and that with this we stopped the sharing session and return to a place where people are able to ask questions if anyone should have anything to say. I am big and I talk a lot. I have already talked a lot, 46 minutes of it. but I have anxiety for silence. So I will now try to be silent for 10 seconds to allow someone to ask anything if they have anything to ask or say anything or throw out any sort of comment. And if not, then we will wind up. But 10 seconds is very long for me, so I will now stare intently at my watch while 10 seconds pass. Alan Whiteside has raised his hand.
Thanks very much for that summary. I was just wondering if you could talk about some of the applications that have already been tested for JackDaw to kind of get a feeling of where it's been validated and where you would like it to go in terms of other applications in rural communities.
So presently we have looked at the first use cases have been a little bit distributed all over the place. So one has been on agricultural decision making, which is highly detailed, very operational, very extremely narrow spatial focus. Single patch of land, weather forecast, land use, soil type, climate data, and so on, to make to assist people in decision making on day-to-day agricultural operations. Another use case has been to determine potential for various types of businesses. So what that falls into an interesting sort of hole between what is the responsibility of government and what's the responsibility of business sector and business development agencies and so on. But okay, one focus: how many people, what population base do you need to be able to support businesses of a certain type, so that when you are trying to fill up your vacant lots, let's say, what sort of things could we put in there based on our connectivity, our infrastructure, our assets at hand, and our relative location to cities. So that is something that falls into the regional development space. A third one, which I'll mention, is something that colleague Philip, that I think is maybe present here today, I don't know. Yes, I see him here, has been working on, which is a sort of composite analysis on the potential of places for developing short supply chains business models based on agricultural products. And once again, it's sort of linking into this idea of seeing what values, what intrinsic value can you get out of a rural region based on its relative location to big markets. I think those three gives ideas, and I think that the space is wide open essentially. I don't think we have any great limitations, but I mean that it would be very interesting to see if we could find more use cases that fits people in the rural development disciplines, people who are working with shaping policies or planning actual land use or trying to shape rural action plans for how are we going to activate, mobilize, or even sustain. Development is one objective. Survival historically has been another, and ultimately the most important one. So I hope those give some examples at least.
Yes, you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I also ask a follow-up question? Would the Polyrural Plus partnerships be open to some of the enhanced applicants actually collaborating, so you could kind of share use cases rather than it sort of being kind of standalone evaluation projects?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the philosophical aspect of the project has one dimension. But any sort of technological output, if it has generic applicability, it is certainly two ways and open back and forth to everyone. We'll be very happy with that. Also, we have a very strong affinity in my native land for your particular flavor of English, so it's nice to hear you speak. Okay, very good. I see Justinos Saris have raised a hand.
Well done with the spelling of the name. So that was actually a very, very interesting. I was amazed by your presentation and how interesting you described JackDaw. I'm gonna go straight to the chase. Obviously interested in the enhanced calls and would like to ask you specifically which types of uses are more interesting for you in terms of like testing use cases. So, I mean, one would be on a essentially research level, like I have a business or I'm like a party collaborating with a governmental entity, trying to figure out, strategies, right? So that will be like replacing research work, as you said, like replacing the GIS specialist. Another case would possibly be something that is accessible to more smaller parties, even individuals, right? So am I building something for, let's say, many touristic agencies to figure out like nice tours or whatever, let's say, or am I building something to help municipalities to plan, or big industries to decide where they're going?
I mean, I think all of these are interesting. I wonder if there is anyone here from our sort of planning perspective present. I'm looking at the names. Some of our original partners are here, but I don't know who I will throw under the bus here to ask. But maybe I'll try to answer it myself.
Yes.
I think all of these dimensions are interesting. I think in general, the commission and most people who are in this project from a planning point of view or from a rural point of view, they would consider the word research to be not a dirty word exactly, but I mean it's sort of a synonym to not very productive. So if we want to reach out to our base, I think we would look for the practical things. So things that have as close link as possible to something tangible. But I mean, literally all of your use cases fit that dimension, and the way you used research was not research as such. You were researching. You were researching
from a business perspective,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Exactly.
And I think that would be a use case that would intrigue several of us. We have some regions that are rural. We have some, and Maria Elena from Muscat here, she is from Malta, which lays claim to be a rural region, but I think it's the most densely populated region in Europe, as it goes. So the idea, I mean, there is broad applicability for all the ideas that you mentioned. So I think in a way, you should choose the focus where you can find the best interaction with users. I think that is at least from my point of view, that's the weakness that I'm suffering from. I have a fairly good idea that we are able to make technology that people find moderately interesting or more, but to find something where you can actually access real users that will tell you with open-heartedly.
Right. Yes, I'm trying to grasp the level of given that from what I understand, there's a lot of room for maturity, right? And in the way JackDaw behaves, I've tested it a little bit, and I found out that I had to build the skill to ask it the proper question to actually get something. So what I was considering was that if I would suggest something that would be thrown out to the general public, let's say, or like a small group of non accustomed people, then possibly you would get skewed feedback or even a lot of noise. So I was trying to understand exactly where to focus, like maybe like focus on 1-2 businesses that want to do some strategic planning for business expansion, for example, or like business opportunities based on spatial data.
Business opportunities would be interesting because now we have had little bit, as I was saying to Alan here before, we have a little bit of a focus on regional development agencies and public sector planning and agricultural businesses. So if you would be interested in looking at the businesses, the service industry and the secondary industry, not necessarily just forestry and agriculture like we have been, that is a hole that has not yet been plugged. So if that is something that interests you, that is something that would be interesting to us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm only coming from that space.
Yeah.
So, and final question, and I'm going to leave the room to other people. Is there somewhere a list of the type of data that are like by default integrated in the searches, so that we basically know where to look for meaningful data? Like I'm not aware whether you have routing data for like transportation data and information, satellite imagery. It would be very, very useful, also on a UI level, I would say, like to have instant access or understanding, like what am I allowed to ask it? Like what is going to tell me?
Yes, I think we are going to we will create a human readable document that we'll put on the Polyrural Plus hub, and we'll send to all of you who have attended here, so that you will have that list, and we will also include a link to that on future webinars, so that people who join on, it does exist now, but it does exist through lots of endpoints and catalogs and machine to machine things. And as I notice, many of you are not machines. I think possibly some of you are, but not many. Okay, very
Thank
good.
you very much.
So Pedro Branco, I see.
Good morning.
Good, and a great morning to you.
So I have two questions. One is a purely, let's say, development integration question, which is how can we integrate this? Because I'm one of the coordinators of one of the proposals that one of the contracts, and we want to integrate this. But when I search for documentation and the endpoints and etc., until now I couldn't find anything. I suppose you are going to supply us with something.
Yes, I will supply you with an open API endpoint that documents the web services, and a public API library that allows you to do authentication towards the endpoint that's required for that. And then something that is not very documented, but that will come, is that this model context protocol. It's not as well developed as our good old WMS servers and whatever existed in the spatial domain, where you had a get capabilities request or something like this, but they do expose something very similar to it. And so we will have, I will try to make such a discovery web service, so you can see what tools, what specific tools are available also. And then at present, we haven't created any sort of, we haven't put up any user restrictions on who can invoke these tools. I mean, that will be irrelevant in the future. If some of you if someone makes a tool that you would like to be payable, or you would like to be restricted to a specific type of user, then we need to add that dimension. And then, of course, if you would query the catalog with a user that doesn't have access to this tool, then it would be hidden. But at present, we haven't implemented that hiding technology and so on. But I will get you the endpoints for the API and for the MCP services, so you will have a URL that you can work against.
Okay. Now a second question. I suppose I know that it's enabled by ChatGPT, etc., etc. Is there any restriction to use any other language than English?
No restrictions. We could. We haven't mentioned much about language in the system prompts, so I don't remember if we have instructed it to answer in the language that the user asks in. But mostly the way this works is that it consults. So okay, you draw your rectangle, you ask your question, it goes out, it queries some data. Those data are typically numerical. And so the table, maybe the table will have English column names if the table is returned, but the reasoning, the final answer that you get, that would typically be in the same language that you ask the question. If it isn't, we will try to tune the prompts so that it is. But in principle, there is no language limitation on that. We are also running this with alternative models like self-hosted DeepSeeks and Contigo models and so on. And I would have to consult with my colleague Marek if those are language sensitive. But of course, ChatGPT 5 and 4 are
Okay.
wide open. I see Alan has raised his hand again. Also, if it's an interjection here, we should allow him to.
It's more sort of general question. Sorry. So I've kind of been doing a bit of networking in the chat, and I kind of see it as you've got people like Pedro, like Jostanis, who are developers and can use JackDaw to maybe develop a new product. But there's others amongst us who are maybe like looking to validate it to sort of solve a problem. And I just kind of wondered whether there was a disadvantage of being wanting just to kind of use the platform standalone as opposed to kind of be able to have an API and connect it into something else, or whether you'd look to kind of bring them together to see, because that was my other question, is like what we've been looking at in Scotland is looking at it for community energy, of using the platform in order to look at how we could use energy in the community. But that could lead on to other things. The initial focus is looking on potential for like vertical farms in Scotland to grow non-domestic food. But that could then look at onto, for example, tourism and maybe links into others. So is there a kind of a constriction that if you say in your kind of application, this is what we're doing, then you've got to stick to that? Or is there kind of opportunities to kind of develop it, but also as I said earlier, link into others? Because I can see a lot of kind of synergies, particularly say, as you were mentioning, like Norway and Finland, where Scotland have similar issues in terms of climate and demographics.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's any. Both perspectives are relevant. Validation of the applicability of JackDaw as an approach to solve problems is relevant, and building your own tools that interface with or replicates or borrows concepts from JackDaw is possible. So if Pedro wants to build an application that he wants to later commercialize, he can use JackDaw as an interface now, and he can substitute it for something else later. He can borrow concepts from it. He can, and the idea here is to facilitate and catalyze. It's not, but I mean, whatever is built into JackDaw will become part of not exactly a monolith, but it will become part of something centralized. So that will be a growing thing. If you have some specialized thing that you would like to build, something that is narrow and focused, and something that you intend to make into a marketable product in the future, then maybe it's better to build something of your own. But our objective as a project is to bring forward JackDaw as a helpful participant in conversations about space in Europe, and so anyone who wishes to use it from a validation point of view are also welcome to that. So comfortable shirt, no straitjacket. That's the main hope.
And like looking at the kind of the synergies, particularly say in rural regions where, as we're discussing, there are probably kind of similar issues, similar opportunities. Would that be seen to maybe do through like workshops as you're doing an enhanced project to kind of facilitate kind of cross-fertilization? Or would that be seen by the Polyrural Plus partners as something would happen once you've completed your project? You can then look to kind of assess the knowledge of products and services kind of co-created through one project to see its affinity to another project.
I mean, what you're saying sounds utterly reasonable, that a cross-fertilization approach would be good. but I'm gonna lob that ball over to, I see Marketa and Tomasz are both here, and they are key to this calls. If anyone of, I mean, I don't know if they are willing to say a word about this, but I think they are the bosses of this, so I should not throw out wild accusations. I have already said that the EU is not responsible for what I'm saying, but Marketa is also not responsible for what I'm saying. So here you see a better and smarter addition.
Thank you, Runar. First of all, many thanks for this perfect presentation. As we can see from this discussion, it is very, very valuable for all of us. I would maybe react to the previous questions regarding the two streamlines, let's say. The one is developing and the one is validating, because we have these two calls. Well, actually it was 4, but in the last 2 rounds, those are 2 different open calls. The develop call, which is now already closed and it's being implemented. This is focused on the developing something new while using the Polyora Plus tools, including JackDaw. And the new call, the enhanced call, there you are supposed to validate the functionality of the JackDaw. So this is something I think this needs to be distinguished, because Alan, I think you are able, you plan to submit your application for the enhanced call. So there is not required any kind of development.
Thank you.
So by pure accident and fortuitous cause, I didn't say anything that was outright wrong, but only because Marketa knew everything in the background. So there you go. By pure accident, I didn't say anything wrong. So because you are on the upcoming, Alan, you are within scope, and because you're in the current one, Pedro, you are also within scope. So it's good.
Marquette, can I also ask when you're like this idea of like the cross-fertilization, is this best done if you get selected after the project rather than trying to do it as a kind of application to say the application we're putting in aligns with this application? It's better to kind of just put in standalone applications and the Polyrural Plus partners can look at it to say, well, actually, you should speak to them and you should speak to them because there's kind of synergies between your projects and the potential impact that you could have through the platform.
Actually, what I would recommend, I would strictly follow the guidelines, because this is something our evaluators will take into account the most when they will evaluate all the proposals, and I'm sure we will have many of them, many of applications. Then they will strictly follow what was written in the guidelines for applicants. So this is my suggestions to you, to all applicants, to really follow the rules there. And if you have something extra, that's fine, but I'm not sure if this will be the I don't know if this will help the application actually. Of course, through the course of the implementation, when you will be dealing with other issues, you will get in touch with us, with the piloting regions, with the consortium, and we can actually communicate all these cross-fertilization issues further. But as for now, I would just recommend to really stick to the guidelines.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will return to looking at the second hand on my watch for 10 seconds, which is a very long time. Okay, Justinos Saris has again raised hand. Very good. So you made it within the 10-second deadline. That's good.
Thank you. So saved by the bell. So I wanted to ask you whether we can have some sort of like a direct communication Q&A as we use it. I mean, I like when I first came across JackDaw, thinking about ideas to basically have some application and for business and strategy development for companies. I I would say like 25 ideas within a few hours. But then I had some issues figuring out exactly, as I said before, what JackDaw can answer. And sometimes the answers are like wrong. So I would like, first of all, to see whether I can have a straight communication with somebody from your team to figure out some issues, as well as I would like to ask whether if I see that if for the enhanced call applications, could I assume a theoretical perfect way of JackDaw performance, whether
Perfect is an interesting term. You can probably not expect perfection, but you can.
no like
what you can expect
the expected
yes,
results,
yes,
right?
yes. Yes, I mean expected results and a certain amount of support and follow-up and direct communication we will enable. We will discuss it on we have weekly meetings in the management of this. So on Monday we will discuss how we will organize that. As I said, this is the first in a series of an enormous amount of seminars where we are going to make a lot of wild claims and promises. And so since this is the first one, we haven't yet found exactly our form, but we'll discuss on Monday how we will organize that one. If I were to give you my email address, which is readily available to everyone, you can send email to that one. But there are people here, like Petra, for example, who will say that this doesn't seem like a rock solid way of getting in touch with me.
No.
There are
I know.
Yeah. So we just need to have a mechanism that means that you can reach someone who will not, for a want of a better word, ignore it. So we will set up some mechanism to handle that, and we will have several such meeting points. Maybe we'll have some question hour like they do in the British Parliament. Maybe it's not called the British Parliament. Maybe it's called the English Parliament. I don't know what they call it over there. Anyway, not the Scots anyway.
Right. So, to be a little bit more specific and for the purpose, I mean, this is I mean, obviously very interesting, because as we dig through, like we would like, I would personally like to have some, support essentially, and discussion, and it will also be like a very direct line for feedback, which I'm pretty sure you want.
Of course, certainly we want, and there will be such things. I think maybe Marketa and Tomas has ideas on how that should be conducted. In maybe not on the technical support. I think we will have to handle, but I mean in terms of feedback and sharing of ideas and so on, maybe they have. Maybe they have.
To the second and more imminent part of my question, which is like, we're about to create to write some applications for the enhanced call, right? So I had the idea, put them down, and then as a business solution I will give the example. Like I have a client who is a student home developer, and they were looking for ideas of how to use rural areas that are close to cities as a good opportunity for student homes, as long as there was good transportation to the universities. This was a really great idea, and the first way to answer which are the best rural areas for that kind of development was JackDaw. I wasn't able to get a comprehensive answer through a series of questions. So my question is, if that happens, do you think that it's still okay to submit this application, even though like so far I haven't figured out how JackDaw could give us the answer, but I'm pretty sure it, through time, it would be able to give the answer.
I think if you describe which data sets would be needed and you can demonstrate that those data sets exists and are available, then it is a perfectly acceptable premise that we try to integrate those data sets.
Right. Exactly.
So,
okay, thank you.
So I don't think that's an exclusionary matter. But Marketa is a far better and more accurate source of information than me. So once you see her here, you should have you should not ignore. You should consider try to get her email.
Okay, fantastic.
She both answers it and she has a lot of knowledge.
Fantastic. Okay.
Maybe one more note from our side. We do not plan to have one-on-one meetings or any kind of support in this stage, I mean, when the enhanced call is still open, because it would not be fair to other applicants.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we plan to, yeah, as Runar said, to find a way how to best support the winning project as they become the winners.
Fantastic.
But the list that Pedro requested before will be available to all, so because that will be sort of fair advantage instead of unfair advantage. So Pedro, you have raised your hand again, please.
Just a question, because I might misunderstood something. When we have a data set, we can integrate it on our own, or we have to send it to you for you to integrate it with JackDaw? I might misunderstood this.
No,
okay?
no, it's 2 for 2. If it's a data set that you would like to integrate and you have the skill and capacity to do it, you do it, and it can be connected to JackDaw via an MCP tool. And if it's a data set that you would like to use in some decision-making process and you would only like to use JackDaw, you wouldn't like to build your own thing. So depending on the 2 different calls, that's different. If it's something you would like to have in JackDaw, but that is presently not there, then you can request that the data should be added. And if the data set indeed is available and can be added, then we will endeavor to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, but both doors are open.
Thank you.
No problem, my pleasure. So, once again, I will look. Nobody has seen me be quiet for 10 seconds. I'm not technically actually quiet, so. Okay, 10 seconds have thereby expired. So with those numerous words, thank you very much to all of you for attending. Thank you very much to those of you who asked questions, because one of the most soul-wrenching things about these seminars is when you sit speaking into your own screen without looking at other people. When you then open the table for questions and there is absolute silence, interrupted by a couple of either shameless flattery or remarks that doesn't meet the mark, that is very, very depressing. So thank you very much to those of you who attended. Thank you very much to those who asked questions, and I wish you the best of continued days, and may the sun forever shine on you, etc. Bye bye.
Thank you, Runar. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.